Silence is the gateway to clarity. It's a truth that few people understand because silence feels uncomfortable at first. We live in a world that constantly demands our attention, screens flashing, notifications buzzing, people talking, content streaming endlessly. We've become addicted to noise. It fills the gaps in our minds where stillness used to live. But if you can step away from that chaos, if you can learn to sit in silence and truly listen, you begin to see something profound. Clarity isn't found in information, it's found in stillness. When the mind is constantly stimulated, it becomes like muddy water. Every thought, every distraction, every opinion stirs up the dirt until you can't see through it anymore. You make decisions based on confusion, fear, or impulse. You move not because you're clear about where you want to go, but because you can't stand still. But silence changes that. When you allow yourself to disconnect from external noise and internal chatter, your thoughts begin to settle. Just like water that stands still becomes clear, your mind becomes transparent. You start to see what's been hiding beneath the surface, your real desires, your real fears, and your real priorities. Most people think clarity comes from more input, more books, more podcasts, more advice. But the truth is, clarity often comes from subtraction, not addition. It's about removing the noise, not adding to it. You can't think clearly if your mind is constantly reacting to new information. The more you consume, the less space you have for your own thoughts. Silence creates that space. It allows you to stop absorbing and start observing. You begin to witness your thoughts rather than drowning in them, and in that witnessing, you discover a quiet intelligence that doesn't need to be told what to do, it already knows. When you spend time in silence, you begin to notice the patterns in your thinking. You realize how much of your mental energy is wasted on worrying about the future or regretting the past. You see how often your mind jumps from one distraction to another, seeking comfort in busyness. Silence exposes these habits. It holds up a mirror to your mind and shows you the truth about how you live and think. And though that truth can be uncomfortable, it's also freeing because awareness is the first step toward clarity. In silence, you also start to separate your own voice from the voices of others. We live in a world where everyone has an opinion, and most of us spend our lives trying to live up to expectations that aren't even ours. Social media tells us who to be. Society tells us what success means. Friends and family tell us what we should want. But silence strips all of that away. When you sit quietly without distraction, you can finally hear your own inner voice, not the one shaped by others, but the one that existed before the world told you who you should be. That voice is your compass. It's your truth, and it only speaks when the noise fades. Clarity isn't about having all the answers, it's about seeing things as they are. In silence, you stop trying to force outcomes and start observing reality. You begin to understand that most confusion is self-created, a product of overthinking, comparison, and fear. When you quiet the mind, those illusions begin to dissolve. You start making decisions from calmness instead of chaos. You stop chasing everything that moves and start moving toward what truly matters. Some of the greatest thinkers, inventors, and creators in history spent long hours in silence, not because they were avoiding the world, but because they were trying to see it more clearly. They understood that creativity and insight don't come from constant activity, they arise from stillness. When the mind is quiet, connections form effortlessly, ideas surface naturally, intuition becomes sharper. In that silence, you realize that thinking is overrated, awareness is what truly guides you. Practicing silence doesn't mean isolating yourself or rejecting the world. It means carrying a stillness within you, even while surrounded by noise. It's about pausing before reacting, listening before speaking, and observing before judging. It's about moving through life with calm awareness instead of constant agitation. In time, silence becomes your ally. You start to crave it instead of fearing it. It becomes the space where your mind resets, where confusion dissolves, and where truth emerges. You begin to notice that clarity isn't something you have to chase, it's what remains when the noise is gone. So when life feels complicated, when decisions seem impossible, or when your mind feels crowded, don't reach for more information. Don't look for another opinion, just sit in silence, breathe, let the thoughts settle. Wait until the water clears, because when it does, you'll see everything you've been searching for was always right there beneath the noise, waiting for you in the quiet. Silence strengthens self-control because it creates space between impulse and action. In that small space, that pause, lies your greatest power, the ability to choose consciously instead of reacting automatically. Most people live their lives in a constant state of reaction. Something happens, and they respond without thinking. A message appears, they reply instantly. Someone criticizes them, they defend themselves. They scroll, they click, they consume. Their days become chains of impulses, automatic, thoughtless, endless. But silence breaks that chain. When you embrace silence, even for a few moments each day, you start to notice the subtle movements of your mind. You begin to observe your urges instead of obeying them. Self-control is not about suppressing your feelings or denying your desires. It's about mastering them. It's about becoming aware enough to choose your response rather than being driven by instinct. Silence trains this awareness. When you sit quietly, your mind will resist. It will throw thoughts at you, memories, worries, cravings, and emotions. You'll feel restless because silence reveals what noise hides. In the absence of distraction, you are left face to face with your inner chaos. That's the test. Most people run from it. But if you can sit through that discomfort, if you can witness those impulses without acting on them, you begin to develop true strength. Every time you observe an urge without feeding it, you grow stronger. You learn that you are not your thoughts, not your cravings, not your emotions. You are the awareness behind them. Silence gives you the chance to see this truth clearly. The moment you realize you don't have to act on every thought that appears in your mind, you gain freedom. That's self-control, not resistance born of fear, but freedom born of understanding. In everyday life, silence teaches you patience. You stop rushing to fill gaps in conversations. You stop reacting to every opinion that crosses your feed. You start to see that not everything requires your attention, and not every emotion deserves a response. The world will constantly try to pull you into its noise, arguments, trends, judgments, distractions, but silence teaches you to stay centered. It teaches you that reacting is easy, but responding with calm intention is rare, and it's what separates the wise from the restless. Think about how much energy is lost through reaction. One careless comment ruins your mood. One negative post ruins your focus. One craving ruins your discipline. That's what happens when the mind has no stillness. It becomes fragile, easily swayed by small waves. Silence is how you build the inner stillness that allows you to remain calm even when the storm comes. When you practice silence, you learn to pause before responding. You take a breath. You allow emotions to pass through you instead of becoming you. That pause, that breath, is where strength lies. Many people misunderstand control. They think it's about forcing yourself to behave a certain way, about fighting against temptation or suppressing emotion. But true control is soft, it's effortless. It comes from awareness. You don't need to force yourself when you fully understand the nature of your impulses. Silence gives you that understanding. It slows time down. It lets you watch the birth of a thought, the rise of a craving, the spark of irritation, and in that moment of awareness, you get to decide. You are no longer a slave to habit. You are the master of your attention. When you sit quietly, you might notice how fast the mind moves. One thought triggers another. One worry leads to a dozen more. Silence allows you to witness this restlessness in its raw form. The more you observe it without judgment, the more it begins to lose power over you. Your thoughts become like clouds passing through the sky, temporary, fleeting, harmless. And as the space between thoughts grows wider, peace begins to enter. That peace is the foundation of discipline. The strongest people aren't the ones who never feel tempted or angry or afraid. They're the ones who can feel those emotions fully without being controlled by them. Silence is the training ground for that kind of strength. It's where you learn to sit with discomfort without running away, to hold emotion without letting it dictate your behavior, to witness pain without letting it define you. Over time, this becomes your default state: calm, aware, unshaken. In silence, you begin to understand that control is not about domination but alignment. It's not about suppressing your nature but harmonizing with it. When you act from awareness instead of impulse, your choices become cleaner, your words become fewer, and your actions become more intentional. You stop wasting energy on meaningless reactions and start directing it toward what truly matters. So the next time you feel the urge to react, to check your phone, to argue, to rush, pause. Let silence hold you for a moment. Feel the space between the urge and the action. That is where mastery lives. That's where the mind grows strong. Because in that stillness, you are no longer driven by the noise of the world, you are guided by the quiet strength within. Silence connects you to truth because it removes the layers of illusion that the world places on your mind. Every day, you are surrounded by endless voices, opinions, judgments, debates, distractions, all claiming to represent the truth. But most of what you hear isn't truth at all. It's noise shaped by fear, ego, and desire. You start to absorb that noise without even realizing it. You begin to think in borrowed thoughts, dream in borrowed images, and chase goals that were never really yours. And yet, deep within you, there's a quiet voice, a knowing that doesn't speak loudly but always speaks honestly. That voice can only be heard in silence. The truth doesn't shout. It doesn't compete for attention. It waits patiently beneath the noise, like calm water beneath a storm. When you sit in silence, the surface turbulence of your thoughts begins to settle. Slowly, you start to see what's underneath the reality of who you are and what you want. This clarity is not something you can find through constant thinking or seeking. It reveals itself naturally when you stop running from stillness. The mind, when quiet, becomes a mirror. It reflects life exactly as it is, without distortion. We often mistake knowledge for truth. We think that if we read more, learn more, or listen to more people, we'll understand more. But truth isn't something you collect, it's something you realize. Knowledge fills the mind, silence empties it. And in that emptiness, truth appears, because truth doesn't need effort, it needs awareness. The more you chase it, the further it moves away. But when you stop chasing, when you simply sit quietly and observe, it comes closer. In silence, you begin to see the difference between what is real and what is imagined. You start to notice how much of your suffering is created by thought, fears that haven't happened, regrets that no longer exist, worries about what others think. These thoughts form a web that traps you in illusion. Silence cuts through that web. It reminds you that most of what troubles you isn't happening in reality, it's happening in your mind. The truth is simpler than your thoughts make it. It's not hidden in complexity, it's hidden beneath it. Silence also reveals the truth about happiness. The world teaches you that happiness comes from achievement, possessions, and approval. So you spend your life chasing external things, thinking they'll make you complete. But in silence, you realize that happiness was never out there, it was always within. It's not something you earn, it's something you uncover when you stop running. When the mind quiets, peace arises naturally. You see that contentment isn't a reward, it's your natural state, buried under the noise of desire and comparison. In silence, the ego loses its grip. The ego thrives on noise, it needs constant validation, arguments, attention, and activity to survive. It tells you stories about who you are, your identity, your past, your status, your reputation. But in stillness, those stories start to fade. You begin to sense something beyond the ego, a deeper awareness that observes everything without attachment. That awareness is truth. It's not your name, your success, or your failures. It's the timeless presence that has always been there, silently witnessing your entire life. This realization is what spiritual teachers and philosophers have pointed to for centuries. They called it enlightenment, awakening, self-realization, but the essence is the same. When the noise of thought subsides, what remains is truth, not a truth that can be spoken or written, but one that can only be experienced. It's the quiet understanding that everything is connected, that life moves with intelligence, and that you are not separate from it. Living in truth doesn't mean escaping the world, it means seeing it clearly. It means acting from awareness rather than reaction. When you are connected to truth, you stop pretending. You stop performing for others. You stop needing to prove yourself. You simply live with honesty and simplicity because there's nothing left to hide. You no longer seek approval because you already understand your own worth. Silence gives you that grounding, it roots you in what's real so deeply that external chaos no longer shakes you. The challenge is that most people fear silence. They fear what it might reveal, because when you sit quietly, you confront everything you've been avoiding, your insecurities, your loneliness, your doubts. But facing them is the only way to move beyond them. Silence doesn't create pain, it exposes it. And once it's exposed, healing begins. That's the paradox of silence. It feels uncomfortable at first because it shows you the truth, but in that truth lies freedom. So spend time with silence every day, not as an escape, but as a return to what's real. Turn off the noise, close your eyes, breathe, and just listen. You'll begin to notice something subtle yet powerful. The more silent you become, the more truth you feel. And the more truth you feel, the freer you become. Because when you're connected to truth, you no longer live in reaction to the world, you live in alignment with it. In the end, silence doesn't just connect you to truth, it is truth. It's the state where everything false falls away and only what's real remains: peace, awareness, and presence. And once you've touched that silence, you realize that no external voice can ever define you again.